The Initiative fleet moved with terrifying precision, its warships cutting through the darkness of space like hunters tracking their prey. Each ship, sleek and heavily armed, was a testament to human ingenuity, far beyond what any of the alien species in the Rylathian Accord could have predicted. But it wasn't just the ships that set them apart. It was the will behind them, the relentless drive of humanity that had been forged through centuries of struggle and war. On the bridge of Judicator Prime, Admiral Sarah Volk stood before the massive viewport, her gaze fixed on the glowing streaks of distant stars. Her mind was calm, calculating. The weight of history rested on her shoulders. The moment humanity re-entered the galactic stage, there would be no going back. Earth was no longer the fragile planet that had been shunned. Earth was the future, and the future demanded obedience. Admiral, a voice broke through her thoughts. Commander Lucius Drex, her second-in-command, stood at attention. The signal has been sent. All known systems in the Rylathian Accord have received the transmission. Good, Volk replied, her voice cold but steady. Now we wait. The transmission, simple yet devastating in its clarity, had gone out across the galaxy. A broadcast from Earth itself. For a moment, there was no need for weapons, no need for armies. The message was a declaration of humanity's return. The voice that spoke from the transmission wasn't that of any one leader, but of a united species. We are the harbingers of change. The galaxy is now ours to shape, surrender, or face extinction. The words echoed across the stars, bouncing off planets and shipwrecks, deep into the homes and minds of species that had long written humanity off. But Earth was back, not weak, not broken, but unbreakable. And the galaxy was now on notice. Back on Earth, in the depths of New Washington, a gathering of the Initiative's highest council members watched the broadcast's effect in real time. Their faces were cold but triumphant as the stars above them swirled in the vast dark. Humanity's return wasn't about vengeance. It was about ascendancy. For too long, Earth had been a silent observer, watching as the galaxy's myriad civilizations turned their backs on them. But now, humanity's strength would carve out a new future. On the Rylathian homeworld, Rylath Prime, the first rumblings of fear began. The leaders of the Accord had long underestimated humanity's potential. To them, Earth was just a fading memory, a species locked in the past. But the Initiative fleet, humanity's tool of reckoning, had proven that their past was nothing compared to the terrifying might of their future. As the Rylathian Council convened to discuss the implications of the broadcast, whispers turned into arguments. Some argued for immediate retaliation, while others questioned how they could have misjudged humanity's strength for so long. Their once proud alliances were beginning to crack under the pressure of one simple truth. Humanity had returned not just to survive, but to dominate. Admiral Volk knew the galaxy would be divided, but what mattered now was the truth that no one could ignore. Earth had returned, and nothing would be the same again. The Rylathian Accord had believed that humanity's return would be a brief and uneventful anomaly, a single, desperate, and misplaced attempt to reassert themselves in a galaxy that had long moved on. But as the Initiative fleet made its way deeper into Rylathian-controlled space, reality began to sink in. This was not the return of a broken civilization. Humanity's ships, led by the flagship Judicator Prime, were an unstoppable force, sleek, efficient, and relentless. They were born of necessity, crafted in the crucible of war and hardship. For the Valaxi, a peaceful industrial world on the fringe of the Accord's territory, the day of reckoning arrived without warning. Valaxi was known for its neutrality, a system that had long avoided the conflicts between the Rylathian species, but now they stood at the forefront of humanity's path. They would be the first to taste the full wrath of the Initiative. The human fleet arrived at Valaxi's orbit, not with the blaring sound of engines or the overt menace of a battlecruiser's guns, but with a calm silence that sent a chill through the air. The Valaxi government initially thought it could negotiate, offer terms of peace, or perhaps buy time with diplomacy. After all, They had a long history of staying out of galactic conflicts. But humanity wasn't interested in negotiation. From the Judicator Prime, Admiral Volk issued the order. A single ship, a sleek destroyer called the Ironclad, moved into position above Valaxi's capital. The human fleet had come equipped with an unprecedented weapon, the Hammerfall, a gravity disruptor capable of breaching the planetary shield with pinpoint precision. The Valaxi, who had once boasted about their technological superiority, watched helplessly as their defenses were torn apart. Valaxi's shield, a technological marvel in its own right, was no match for the destructive power of humanity's weapon. The Hammerfall struck like a hammer, sending tremors through the planet as the shield's structural integrity began to fail. For hours, there was only confusion and panic as Valaxi's people scrambled to comprehend what was happening. Governments collapsed into chaos, and the capital city became a battleground of its own, not between soldiers, but between factions of civilians trying to save themselves. The world's leaders quickly understood. This was not a fight they could win. They had hoped for a miracle, but now they saw only the cold, implacable power of the humans who had returned. In less than 12 hours, the surrender came. A message was broadcast across Valaxi, pleading for peace. The human fleet remained in orbit, hovering silently, watching as the leaders of Valaxi offered their formal capitulation. The message sent back to Earth was chilling in its simplicity. We submit. Back on Judicator Prime, Admiral Volk allowed herself a moment's pause as she watched the transmission. Another victory. Another world bound to the initiative's will. Her face remained stoic, but within her, a flicker of pride sparked. This was the beginning. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, not as supplicants, but as conquerors. As the Valaxi officials signed the treaty, one laced with subtle terms that would bind them to human influence for centuries, Admiral Volk's voice crackled through the comms. "This is only the beginning," she said softly to her crew. "Let the galaxy see what happens when humanity rises." Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. The first world to fall under humanity's sway was no longer a distant rumor, but a harbinger of things to come. The Rylathian Accord, still struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what had just occurred, began to stir in earnest. What they had failed to see was simple. Humanity was not just a species of survivors. They were born to dominate. The Valaxi's surrender, swift and complete, sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Humanity had made its first move, and now, the universe had to reckon with the new power that had risen from the ashes of Earth. But while the Initiative fleet continued its unrelenting march toward the heart of the Rylathian Accord, the Council on Rylath Prime was scrambling to formulate a response. Their first instinct was retaliation, to strike back, to assert dominance over what they believed was a rogue force in galactic space. But the leaders of the Accord were divided. The Rylathian ambassador, Talaris, a diplomat with decades of experience, pushed for one course of action: diplomacy. If humanity had come to challenge the Accord, then it was time for peace talks, to negotiate terms. There was no room for more bloodshed, not after the sudden fall of Valaxi. They've shown their strength, but that doesn't mean we must fight. We are a galactic union, Talaris argued, standing before the Rylathian Council, which consisted of representatives from more than a dozen species. We must offer them a seat at the table before we escalate this conflict further. But the Jalarax, a towering warrior race known for their fierce combat prowess, objected. Negotiate. With these humans, they struck our allies without warning. If we give them anything, they will demand everything. Talaris's response was calm but firm. We cannot afford war with them. The galaxy must find a way to coexist with this new threat. After hours of heated debate, the decision was made. An envoy would be dispatched to meet with the humans. The mission was clear: offer peace and avoid further destruction. Meanwhile, aboard the Judicator Prime, Admiral Volk awaited the Accord's response. The message came through a secure channel, an official request for diplomatic talks. At first, Volk considered the request with a clinical detachment. Her mind was always several steps ahead, weighing the possibilities. It wasn't the first time humanity had faced negotiation, but it would be the first time they held all the cards. Would they make concessions, or would they accept nothing less than absolute submission? Volk turned to Commander Lucius Drex, her most trusted officer. Prepare for the meeting. But remember, we are not here to discuss peace. We are here to impose terms. We'll give them a choice, one that no one can refuse. Drex nodded. Understood, Admiral. Shall we begin the countdown to the next target? Volk's lips curled into a tight smile. Not yet. Let's see how the Accord negotiates with its new masters. The meeting took place aboard the flagship. A sleek, silver shuttle descended from the Accord's command ship, the Cyrath, carrying the Rylathan diplomatic team. As the ship docked, the crew aboard the Judicator Prime watched with a mixture of curiosity and calculation. The atmosphere on the bridge was cold, purposeful. The humans were not interested in friendship. They were interested in control. As the Rylathan delegation entered the Grand Hall of Judicator Prime, the humans made no overt gestures of welcome. Instead, the aliens were led to a long table where Admiral Volk stood waiting. She was the image of calm, a woman who had seen the worst the galaxy had to offer and emerged victorious. Without a word, she motioned for them to sit. The lead ambassador, Talaris, broke the silence. Admiral Volk, we've come to discuss the future of our relations. The Accord is open to negotiation, but we ask that you... Volk interrupted him, her voice sharp and commanding. You ask? No, Ambassador. You will listen. The time for asking is over. She leaned forward, her gaze never leaving Talaris's eyes. Humanity is not here to negotiate. You will submit. You will pay tribute. You will offer loyalty, or your systems will fall one by one, just like Valaxi. The silence in the room thickened. Volk's words hung in the air like a death sentence, leaving the diplomats to face the crushing reality of their situation. For the first time, they realized the true scale of the threat before them. Humanity was not just another species vying for dominance. It was the future of the galaxy. Talaris swallowed, his hand trembling as he reached for the datapad in front of him. Admiral, we... Volk raised a hand, cutting him off. I'm not here to hear your excuses, Ambassador. Your choices are simple. Submit now or face the consequences. The room was still. The galaxy outside continued to spin, unaware of the monumental shift underway. The meeting with the Rylathan delegation had been a revelation, both to the galaxy and to the humans aboard the Judicator Prime. The delicate dance of diplomacy had been swiftly shattered by Admiral Volk's unyielding stance. The Rylathan Accord, it seemed, was in no position to negotiate. They were simply stalling for time. Earth's ultimatum had been issued, and now it was only a matter of how quickly the galaxy would bend to humanity's will. As Volk reviewed the reports of the diplomatic meeting, a new wave of tension began to stir across the galaxy. The Jar Dominion, an ancient and powerful empire of reptilian warriors, was watching humanity's rise with growing concern. The Jar had long considered themselves the dominant force in the Outer Rim, their fleets unmatched in power, and their warriors renowned for their savagery. The Valaxi fall had struck them hard. The suddenness of it, the brutal efficiency of humanity's assault, was something they had not predicted. General Krizek, a battle-hardened leader of the Jar, sat in the war room of his flagship, the Scorner. He surveyed a holographic map of the galaxy, his eyes narrowing as he traced the path humanity was taking. The Jar had never feared another species in all their years of conquest, but the appearance of the human initiative was different. There was an unpredictability to them, an alien ambition that the Jar could not understand. We cannot let them continue unchecked, Krizek growled, his claws tapping against the table. His officers exchanged uneasy glances. We can't let them pass through the expanse, one of his subordinates, Vecnar, suggested. We've already lost Valaxi. If they take more, the outer colonies will fall like dominoes. Krizak leaned forward. We will send them a message. We will show them that the Jar Dominion does not bend to threats. The Jar fleet, massive and deadly, began to gather in the Polaris expanse, a region of space rich in resources but dangerous to navigate. It was a region of contested space where the borders between different species often blurred. Humanity's ships, far from deterring the Jar, had ignited a bloodlust. The Jar would strike first, proving to the galaxy that no one would intimidate them. Meanwhile, back aboard the Judicator Prime, Admiral Volk was already anticipating the next move. The Rylathian response had been tepid, but the Jar were different. They would fight. And in a way, that was exactly what Volk wanted. Humanity had no interest in being drawn into a protracted war, but the Jar offered the perfect opportunity to demonstrate the true power of the initiative. Prepare for battle, Volk ordered her officers, her voice calm but resolute. We will meet them head-on in the expanse. Commander Drex, ever the strategist, stepped forward. Admiral, the Jar are formidable. We've faced skirmishes with their fleets before, but this will be different. Their sheer numbers. Volk cut him off with a cold smile. We're not facing them on equal terms. We have something they don't. What's that, Admiral? Control. The plan was simple, almost too simple. Instead of engaging the Jar head-on in an open battlefield, humanity would deploy a new weapon, a fleet of neuromorphic AI warships, adaptive vessels capable of adjusting their tactics in real time. Each ship was alive with intelligence, designed to learn and evolve during battle. The Jar's brute force wouldn't stand a chance against this level of precision. The Jar are predictable, Volk continued. They rely on sheer power, on overwhelming their enemies with strength. But strength can be countered with the right tools. We'll show them the future. As the Jar fleet neared the expanse, their warriors roared with anticipation. They were ready for war. But what they did not realize was that they were walking into a trap not set by human hands, but by human mind. The first encounter would be swift, the Jar oblivious to the dangers that awaited them. The humans, with their cold efficiency, had already laid the foundation for a victory not born of might, but of strategy. The galaxy would soon understand. The initiative didn't fight like other species. Humanity didn't just win. They adapted, they learned, and they conquered. The Jar fleet, vast and deadly, moved forward into the heart of the Polaris expanse, its hulls gleaming in the cold void. General Krizak stood at the bridge of the Scorner, watching the stars streak by. His fleet was a terrifying sight, 1,000 warships, each carrying the weight of centuries of conquest. The Jar had never known defeat, and Krizak was confident that this human incursion would be nothing more than a fleeting inconvenience. We will crush them, Krizak growled to his officers, his reptilian eyes narrowing as he stared out at the endless expanse. Humanity's arrogance will be their undoing. But what Krizak did not see, what none of the Jar saw, was the subtle dance unfolding in the silence of space. Humanity's neuromorphic AI warships had already deployed, their sleek forms slipping into position among the stars. The Vanguard fleet, led by the Judicator Prime, moved with methodical precision, its ships scattered across the expanse like invisible predators. Admiral Volk stood in the heart of the Judicator Prime, her eyes scanning the tactical projections as the Jar ships drew nearer. They're overconfident, she murmured, more to herself than to her crew. It's their weakness. Let's make them regret it. The first wave of Jar warships burst into the combat zone, their weapons primed and ready. They fired without hesitation, unleashing a torrent of missiles and energy blasts, streaking toward what they believed to be the human fleet. But as the blasts closed in, the humans made no attempt to evade. Instead, they allowed the projectiles to fly. And then, with terrifying precision, humanity's AI warships unleashed their countermeasures. The Neuralink weapon systems aboard the AI warships intercepted the Jar's missiles mid-flight, dismantling them before they even had a chance to reach their targets. The AI warships turned and adapted, shifting their positioning as their systems learned and evolved, countering every maneuver the Jar attempted. The Jar had never faced anything like this. General Krizek snarled as he watched the holographic display from the bridge of his flagship. His ships were attacking with all their might, but humanity's tactics seemed to be evolving faster than his warriors could react. The human ships weren't merely dodging. They were outthinking him at every turn. "What is this?" he growled in disbelief. They're not fighting like any species we've encountered." Volk's voice, cool and controlled, came through the communications channel. "General Krizak, you are not the first to underestimate us, but you will be the last. Humanity does not play by your rules. We make the rules." In the heat of battle, the Jar's overconfidence began to crumble. The human AI warships adapted to every tactic, countering with ever more deadly responses. The Jar, unable to predict their enemy's next move, were thrown into disarray. Their ships collided, their formations shattered. The once mighty fleet faltered under the weight of a new, unseen enemy. And then the humans moved in for the kill. The Judicator Prime led the charge, its heavy weaponry unleashed with devastating force. Energy pulses lanced out, striking the Jar ships with pinpoint accuracy, tearing through shields and armor like tissue paper. The first Jar vessel exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Its core ruptured. One by one, the Jar ships began to fall, their once imposing fleet reduced to a chaotic mess of debris and burning wreckage. General Krizek roared in fury, his claws digging into the command chair. "Retreat," he bellowed, but it was too late. The damage was done. His forces were routed, their morale shattered in the face of humanity's unrelenting might. As the last of the Jar ships retreated into the depths of space, Volk watched silently from the Judicator Prime. The battle had been swift, almost too swift. But it was another victory, another galactic power humbled in the face of humanity's rise. "This is just the beginning," Volk muttered to herself, her eyes scanning the debris field that was once a fleet. "The galaxy will learn the price of underestimating us." And with that, humanity's dominance was cemented, not through brute strength alone, but through the unrelenting power of adaptation, intelligence, and will. The Jar had learned the hard way, but they weren't the last to come. There would be more, and humanity would be ready. The aftermath of the Battle of the Expanse sent ripples through the galaxy, far beyond the shattered remnants of the Jar fleet. The alliance that had once seemed invincible, the mighty Rylathian Accord, the Jar Dominion, and other allied systems, was beginning to fray at the edges. The Jar had suffered their first defeat in centuries, humiliated by humanity's unyielding tactics. Their fleet was in disarray, their warriors disillusioned, and their once unquestioned dominance now in question. Back on Rylath Prime, the Council of the Accord was in turmoil. The Jar were reeling, but they weren't the only ones affected. The Velaxi had surrendered to humanity, bending the knee to a species they once dismissed as weak. And though the Rylathian leaders had tried to hold on to their lofty ideals of peace and unity, the reality of what humanity represented had started to sink in. The initiative wasn't just a threat to their way of life. It was a force that had the potential to upend the very balance of power across the galaxy. Ambassador Talaris, still reeling from the events of the failed negotiation with Admiral Volk, sat at the center of the Council's chamber, his hands shaking as he read the latest reports. The Jar were regrouping, and humanity was expanding its influence rapidly. The message was clear. The Rylathian Accord, as it had been, was no longer sustainable. It would either bend to humanity's will or fracture completely. "We cannot ignore this any longer," Talaris spoke up, his voice a whisper barely above the noise of the Council. "Humanity is on the rise, and if we do not act quickly, we risk losing everything we've built. The Jar cannot be our shield any longer." The Rylathian representatives shifted uneasily in their seats. Their once proud alliance with the Jar was weakening, the cracks widening with every defeat, their fear of humanity. A species they once considered beneath them was becoming too great to ignore. "We must rally the remaining members of the Accord," argued Kalara, a representative of the Trellics, a species known for their vast resources and military might. "We have to unite against this common threat before humanity gathers enough strength to overthrow us all." But Draxel, a leader from the Shelnar, a species known for their subversive tactics and covert operations, shook his head. "If we make a move against them, we guarantee their wrath. Humanity does not negotiate from weakness. They move when they sense opportunity. We may be able to outmaneuver them, but only if we act quietly. The time for war is not yet." "There is no time left," Draxel, Talaris snapped, his voice rising with the weight of desperation. "Humanity is already entrenched in multiple systems. The Velaxi, the Jar, they have all fallen before them. The galaxy's balance is shifting, and we are standing still, waiting for them to knock at our door." The Rylathian Council was now in a fractured state, torn between factions who either feared humanity's rapid expansion or sought to subvert the initiative with their own alliances. Tensions ran high, with mutual distrust poisoning every debate. At the heart of it all, however, was one unifying realization. The Accord was no longer an unstoppable force. It had become vulnerable, fragile in the face of humanity's relentless march forward. On Earth, however, Admiral Valk stood in the war room aboard the Judicator Prime, studying the latest intelligence. The Jar were in retreat, their remaining ships scattered across the vastness of the expanse. The Rylathian Accord was divided, weak from within. The pieces were falling into place, and soon there would be no resistance left in the galaxy. Valk's mind was already calculating the next move. She had no interest in diplomacy. She knew that humanity's future was secured not by words, but by strength. As she watched the tactical map of the galaxy shift in her favor, a quiet but profound satisfaction stirred within her. "We've already won," she said, more to herself than to anyone else. "It's just a matter of time before the galaxy falls into line." With the alliance fractured, humanity now stood at the precipice of a new era, one defined by domination rather than diplomacy. The galaxy was beginning to see that the balance of power had already shifted. And as Admiral Valk stared at the stars, the future of the galaxy was no longer in question. Humanity had arrived. The Rylathian Accord had once been the pinnacle of galactic unity, a symbol of strength forged by countless civilizations. But the fractures within the Accord had become impossible to ignore. As humanity's influence spread like wildfire, the once mighty alliance began to crumble from within. The Jar were beaten and humiliated, the Velaxi were subjugated, and even the Trellics had begun to question their allegiance. Only the Rylathians themselves, despite their internal division, still held the key to halting the human tide. Rylath Prime, the jewel of the Accord and its capital, stood as the last symbol of unity. It was a world of towering spires, endless cities, and breathtaking vistas that stretched to the horizon. But even as the planet gleamed in the distant stars, its leadership was in chaos. The council was divided, unable to come to any agreement about how to face the rising threat. There were those who believed that peace with humanity was possible, that diplomacy might still work, and then there were others who called for total war. Talaris, the once respected ambassador, found himself caught in the middle. He had fought for peace, believing the Accord could still survive, but now the situation was beyond even his diplomatic abilities. Valk's ultimatum still echoed in his mind. You will submit or face the consequences. What could he offer in return? Humanity had already proven its dominance. The battle tactics, the relentless adaptation. The strength and unity of the Accord were now fragile, too fragile to stand against the storm that was coming. We are standing at the edge of destruction. Talaris spoke to the council, his voice weary but determined. We cannot afford another mistake. The Jar are already in retreat. The Velaxi have surrendered. And humanity. Humanity is coming for us all. On the bridge of the Judicator Prime, Admiral Volk stood resolutely, observing the tactical data that streamed across the screens. The Rylathian capital had resisted the idea of humanity's rise, but their strength, their resolve. It was no longer a matter of if they would submit. It was only a matter of how long they could resist. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from Rylath Prime," Commander Drex reported, his voice steady. "It's from Ambassador Talaris." Volk's expression remained cold. She had expected this, Rylath's final attempt at diplomacy. But there would be no negotiations this time. She motioned for the transmission to be put through. Talaris's face appeared on the screen, his expression tired and conflicted. "Admiral Volk, I speak for the Rylathian leadership. We wish to offer terms. A path to peace. Humanity's rise has already reshaped the galaxy, and we are willing to acknowledge your dominance." Volk's lips curled into a thin smile. She had anticipated this, and yet the weight of Talaris's surrender still carried a certain satisfaction. "Your offer is noted, Ambassador," she said, her voice flat. "But it is too late for peace." Talaris faltered, his eyes dark with the weight of his own realization. "Then, you will destroy us." Volk's gaze never wavered as she leaned closer to the screen, her words cold and final. "Not destroy, Ambassador. Your world will remain standing, but you will kneel." On Rylath Prime, the last of the Rylathian Council gathered in their chambers, unable to act, unable to fight back. They had hoped for peace, but now they understood that their only choice was capitulation. As the human fleet moved into position above Rylath, the entire galaxy watched, breathless. Humanity had done what none could have imagined. They had turned the balance of power on its head. Admiral Volk gave the order. "Initiate the Hammerfall." A single pulse from the Judicator Prime hit the planetary shield of Rylath. It was the same devastating weapon that had cracked Valaxi's defenses. This time, it wasn't a show of force. It was the final gesture, a reminder that the galaxy no longer belonged to the Accord. It belonged to humanity. Rylath Prime's shields failed, the colossal defenses shattering like glass under the precision of humanity's power. The world below was still beautiful, still magnificent, but now it was bound. Bound to humanity's will, just as every world before it had been. There would be no war, no conflict. The Accord would submit. Volk's cold, emotionless voice echoed across the fleet. "The Rylathian Accord has fallen. We have won." And with that, the galaxy knew that humanity's dominance was no longer a future to be feared. It was a present reality. The galaxy had shifted irreversibly. The fall of Rylath was not merely the collapse of a single empire, nor the defeat of a single power. It marked the final unraveling of the Rylathian Accord, the death of an era where multiple species could coexist as equals. Humanity had proven its strength, its resolve, and most crucially, its capacity to rule. A new order had risen from the ashes of the old. Admiral Volk stood at the command center of the Judicator Prime, her gaze fixed on the holographic map of the galaxy. Rylath was now under full human control, its once proud cities now operating under the strict oversight of human governors. Every corner of the planet, every resource, every living being would now answer to the initiative. There were no more negotiations, no more tentative alliances. There were only those who had bent the knee and those who had been crushed beneath humanity's unyielding will. "Rylath has fallen," Commander Drex said, standing beside Volk, his voice tinged with awe. "The final holdout of the Accord is gone. What comes next?" Volk's lips curled into a rare, almost imperceptible smile. "Next, we begin the process of reshaping the galaxy. We give the systems time to learn, time to accept the inevitable. But soon, they will all belong to us." It was a gracious victory, in its own way. Humanity had conquered with precision, with intelligence, and with an overwhelming strategy that rendered old methods of warfare obsolete. It wasn't the raw strength of military might that had brought down the Accord, but humanity's ability to adapt, to evolve in the heat of battle. The Jar, the Rylathians, even the Valaxi, They had all underestimated this young species. Across the galaxy, the shattered remnants of the Accord were forced to make their peace with the new reality. Some sought to negotiate, others fled into the dark corners of space, but most understood the writing on the wall. The initiative was not a passing phase. It was the new order of the galaxy. Ambassador Talaris, once a proud representative of the Rylafin people, now stood before the human High Council in the heart of the Judicator Prime. He had come not as an enemy, but as a subjugated leader, bringing with him the remnants of his people's dignity. He knew that any hope of maintaining his people's sovereignty had died with Rylath. "I come to you," Talaris began, his voice low, "not as a leader of the Accord, but as a representative of the last of my people. I offer the formal surrender of the Rylafin people. We will comply with your new governance, and we will make no further attempts at resistance." Volk's expression remained unreadable, but the faintest flicker of recognition passed through her eyes. This was what victory looked like, not in battle, but in submission. "Your people will be treated as all others. You will become part of the initiative. Your resources, your military, your intelligence, all will be assimilated into our vast network." Talaris nodded, though his face remained somber. "We understand, and we accept. The future belongs to you now." The door to the council chamber opened, and the Trellix representative, Kalara, entered, her movements quick and sure. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Humanity's rise is undeniable. I bring word from the Trellix Council. We are ready to negotiate terms for our assimilation into the initiative." Kalara's words struck like a hammer. The Trellix, a species that had once stood as the bulwark against the initiative's rise, had now turned. Their influence had dwindled, their resistance futile. The initiative's grip on the galaxy was tightening. Volk stood, her voice firm. "The terms are simple. Assimilate or be crushed. The Trellix will contribute to the strength of the initiative, just as all systems will." Kalara bowed her head, a gesture of defeat, but also of submission to the inevitable. "We accept your terms." Humanity had become more than just a power. It had become a force of unification, a galactic empire that would stretch across the stars. The last remnants of resistance were swept away, and the galaxy, for better or worse, would now be ruled by one name: humanity. And so, as Volk surveyed the galaxy, now firmly in her grasp, she could not help but reflect on the journey that had brought them here. It had been a long, hard road, one marked by trials, battles, and the unwavering determination to prove humanity's worth. "We will be the architects of this new age," Volk said softly, more to herself than to anyone else, "and it will last for 1,000 generations." This was the end of the galaxy's old order, and the dawn of humanity's reign. A reign built not on brute force alone, but on intelligence, strategy, and the relentless pursuit of dominance. The galaxy had fallen, and now humanity was the future.